Hello everyone, my name is Denysenko. I'm working in a Petcube for over a year, and my very first assignment was to implement new architecture in a redesigned version of an app. So I hope to help you to understand, do you want some kind of this architecture implemented in your app, because well, it helped us. But there is no silver bullet, as we know. So, not so long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a Petcube app 2.0, and there was few developers that worked on it during, I think, during its life, and it has been in active development for 3 years and more, actually, and it's has been developed in a so-called startup spirit, when you have features in priority and not architecture, not readability or something, but features fast. So architecture lost few battles in terms of architecture. Tight coupling of code, spaghetti code, callback hell, we all know this, and a lot of legacy caused by third-party libraries such as event bus, self-made wrapper around the HTTP client, and so on. But war is not yet lost. We understood that if we want to not have this situation again in our new application, we need to come up with architectural solution. So we started choosing some kind of pattern here. We wanted that our code to be scalable, modular, and testable, as we always want. We wanted to use dependency injection at last, because there was none in old project, and because we hoped it will help us with modularity of code. And we wanted to use RxJava for solving callback hell situation. And on the other hand, we wanted to control the spreading of our any third-party lib, because they tend to be unreliable. We looked at existing classical patterns, and we decided that they do not work for us. We want something that covers whole project, not just presentation layer. So this thing happened. We read those article, Architected Android the Clean Way by Fernando Cejas, and we liked it. Side word here, I presented, I made these slides for Android developers, but the code will be in the end, so I think the whole stuff I will present here will be adaptable for any kind of application. For example, in iOS there is Viper. It's implementation of clean architecture for iOS. So why clean architecture? Have anyone read about it, by the way? And yeah, cool. Have anyone tried to implement it or something? Yeah? Okay, then I will talk a little bit about it. Well, it looks like this, somewhat complicated, and but it has its pros. First one, it is architectural pattern, so it really treats the whole project, not just presentation layer, not just some kind of job like repository pattern. Nope, it is architectural. Second thing is that it treats your code like layered pie, with code files, classes as layers, and interfaces as in between them. It enforces strict dependency rule. It is directed from outer layer towards inner layer. More about it later. And some basics. It makes your application scalable, modular, testable, and so on. To better understand, let's divide this pie into layers. And now we can see that all our modules are belong to some kind of layer. So web, database, UI, framework dependent things are in the outer layer, in the first one. Repositories and presenters, some kind of abstraction on them. A second, use cases next, and entities the last one. By the way, number of layers is totally up to you. You can make more. I wouldn't recommend make less. And the whole thing was presented by Robert Martin, Uncle Bob, so he knows this stuff. Let's divide now all those layers into their target job. So like UI and presenters work for presentation. Use cases and entities work on domain, and data is repositories, web, and DB. So everything is clear here except entities and use cases. Entities, by Uncle Bob intention, they contain enterprise level business logic and some DTOs, models, something like that. Because I am Android developer and you are mobile developers, we don't really need some enterprise level logic in most cases. So in entities layer, only models are present. Use cases are the thing of this architecture. They contain application level logic. And it means that you should treat these classes as class that contains implementation of some use case. For example, user wants to come to home screen and see his personal data. So this use case will fetch it. I will show you examples later. Funny thing how we adopted this architecture. First of all, the most important thing when you're trying some new technology, new pattern or something, you should communicate inside your team to fully understand. Does everyone comprehend it? Every team member should know which class should be use case, which class shouldn't. Should this use case be reused on other screens, so it shouldn't change in in the future, or it should be like complex use case that you can modify and make some RxJava magic inside it. It should be communicated. Another thing we did is, as we were redesigning the app, we had a lot of legacy code that we had no time to refactor. So we wanted to control it so it wouldn't spread in our new fancy beautiful code. We put it in a different module of application, and so we wanted to, when opportunity presents itself, we wanted to pick a little piece of old code and quickly make it beautiful. So you should always think ahead what will you refactor and what not. What will probably change and what won't. And keep it simple. If you read about some technologies that you should use 50 levels of abstraction, you should know, you should think, do you really need it? Maybe you can cheat a little bit. So we cheat a little bit, and it's okay. Our conscience is clear. Next thing is packaging. So in this article by Fernando Cejas, he proposed layer-based packaging. So it would look like this: data classes in one module, domain in another, presentation in another, and as you can see, you get 3 Java folders. You will have your whole project divided, and it's really not very good for unit tests. So we came up with this one. So we just break our classes by screen, and all the classes that we want to be responsible for login logic, they all in one package, and it makes possible to have a lot of classes packaged private. But did it worth it? First bad thing is that we depend not on use case interfaces, but on their implementation, which is somewhat break an inversion principle and dependency inversion, whatever. But it's okay in our case because we didn't want to over-engineer without cause. Another bad thing is that RxJava that we use is third party. As I mentioned, we don't really trust third-party libraries, but in 2017, RxJava is as well as part of Java. Quite a lot of code. As you will see later, you will have to implement like 6 or 7 classes just for one screen, for one simple job, but you might consider, do you need this screen to be divided in this logic, in this way, or not? If it's just some, I don't know, web view, why would you need it? But if logic may change in the future, I would recommend to think ahead and make it scalable. Pros: code reuse, huge code reuse, but not presentational, but business logic. So, as I said earlier, all your application business logic lays in use cases, and use cases can be simply reused in different presenters. So if you like have use case for, I don't know, getting user profile, you can easily reuse it anywhere and do not re-implement it or do not copy and paste from one presenter to another. Another great thing is that complex flow can be implemented without callback hell. Actually, one part of this thanks to RxJava. Another part is that this dependency rule, it enforces you to think about it, enforces you to try and do not make too much callbacks and put everything in one or two use cases when it's single responsible. And great thing is that presentation separated from business. Business logic can sometimes stay unchanged, but designer comes up to you and says, let's change something here, and you are like, have idiot proof that you won't break your business logic by fastly implementing some quick fix of UI. That's a good thing. And thanks to everything being separated in logic modules, evolution of pattern is possible. We can simply change something on outer layer of our application. Outer layer is where your framework dependent stuff is, and you can change some dependency on library or re-implement anything, and you won't affect another code. This is a dependency graph of one simple screen on the previous version of application, and as you can see here in the center with a lot of arrows towards it is one class that a lot of other classes depend on. I won't bore you. It's just a model, just a simple like profile class with fields and everything with JSON serialization. And everyone, almost everyone, knows about it. Everyone has it in some way. After we implemented this architecture, we have this dependency graph is simpler, more directional, and this class is here now in left top corner. Only 2 classes know about it, and everything else is abstraction. So there is no battle now. Your product features don't stay in the way of architecture, and architecture doesn't stand in the way of implementing new cool product features. Complex flow and presentation layers that can stand in the way. Now I will show you some code of some cool stuff we came up with. Now, before that, I will show you simple implementation of a use case class. So we took it from Fernando Ceja's article. We modified it a little bit for our needs, but main idea stays the same. We have simple class with thread executors, with a simple constructor here, and main method of this class is execute. So RxJava use cases use RxJava, but presenters only pass a subscriber to it and nothing else. We don't let RxJava to spread into presentational layer. So when we want to use some use case, we just presenter will call execute, pass subscriber, and that's all. Also, we have unsubscribe for stopping the execution, and some abstract build use case observable method that should be implemented by real use cases. Let's look at this flow. For example, we want user to open the screen, load some data to show his profile. So we want for our presenter just once to call execute on use case. Then use case will call repository call API or database or something behind it. And as soon as we will have response, we will show profile to users. Simple, trivial stuff. And this is the whole use case. We have repository injected into our use case, and build use case method just returns repository observable. Let's just make it a little bit complex. We want our use case to stay only one in presenter. We don't want to recreate it every time because we have Dagger. We would like to have like singletons or something. So we don't want to recreate it, but we want it to work with different user IDs. We want it to return in the same callback, in the same method. We want to return user class. So sequence will look like this. view has somewhere user IDs. It gives them. It calls presenter. Please load my friends with these IDs. And presenter should configure use case, execute it, and pass the result back. The whole API thing stays the same. How we will do that? For that, we will have simple use case. It almost doesn't change, only setter with ID. And this funny stuff in build use case observable, we wrap our repository call with try and finally, because finally will be called after return. So in that way, we can set user ID to some default value and validate it every time. The whole magic is happening in presenter now. We have map with user ID and subscriber. And every time we call use case execute, we put that subscriber into the map. This way, instance of subscriber is being held in presenter, and this parallel execution is possible. And every time we want to stop execution, we call destroy. And this is how user subscriber looks like. Simple implementation. And next we called view. On error, we showing some basic error. Here I want to show you that your use case doesn't simply should be stupid. It doesn't really. Here is the case when we want our friend isn't just a user entity. Our friend has certainly profile, but also he may have Petcubes, for example. And for that, we inject in our use case two repositories, user repository and Petcube repository. And here is setter the same as before. And in build use case observable method, we have a little bit of magic. Observable zips two calls and returns friend entity. Still not a lot of code, but logic can be more complex with time. Our friends can be online or offline or busy or something, so we may need polling request for that. We want to execute a use case just once, but receive responses every time we have it from the web. So use case here has a published subject here for that purpose. It will receive on next every time, and build use case method just returns it as observable. The magic now happens in add user ID method. It's like a setter, but with logic. We have here we have subscription in map that we will put in map. Subscription is built on observable that implements some simple RxJava polling, and in a flat map, we when period of time polling delay, when it happens, every time we make an API request or socket request, and we return it. We have remove user ID when we don't want to poll some kind of friend anymore. It may not be seen on screen anymore, or we just not friends with that person anymore. That was all whole code. Now, what I wanted to tell at last is that we also think that project evolution should happen over the time. We want to try new things, experiment with new technologies, and that's we are now looking at Google architecture components. It was presented on I/O last of this year, and we liked it a lot. And in our architecture, we think we're considering a life cycle component and view model implementation. It looks nice, and we think we will use it in the future iterations. RxJava 2, we all love RxJava so much, and we want to use a second version of it. And now, because we don't have it in presentation layer, it will be less pain to migrate to second version. Data binding is interesting thing. It felt weird like year and a half ago, but now we are looking into it, and we may change our presentation logic too. Here are cool resources that I encourage you to see through. And thanks. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Dmytro, for your experience, for sharing your experience. I'm wondering about the transition period to implement that kind of architecture in your project. How long did it take? What kind of challenges did you face with, and something like that?
Yes. Well, we were lucky. We were rewriting a lot of, we were almost writing from scratch with third version of application. But and it took around 2 months and work of 2 developers. But if you would like to implement this on your existing project and you don't have the luxury of such an amount of time, you just can go with like pick one module and put it in another package to not mess around, and work it there. Look how it will change. Look how it will help you. I think it will be the most results will be better on some complex screen where you have a lot of interaction or a lot of logic behind it.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Tell me, please, do you use some converters for models between layers?
Yes, it's a good point. So the article by Uncle Bob implied that you shouldn't, that your presentation layer shouldn't depend on your models you get from your API or database or something. So it encourages you to use converters between layers. And yes, we do use converters on a lot of screens, but we are just cheating on simple screens because it's just redundant over engineering. If anyone used our application, you can see that home screen is like huge. A lot of things happen there. So we have a lot of use cases in this presenter, and we have a lot of mapping between requests. So yes, a lot of converters.
One more question from my side. I'm wondering whether you thought about, for example, step-by-step transition, something like that. Just imagine that it is a complex pattern or something. Probably it requires a lot of efforts to implement, to write code or something like that. Probably in some part of code you need to, for example, a simpler solution or something like that. Have you used it or not, or decided to write to follow this architecture pattern everywhere in the project?
So thank you for the question. The main idea behind this architecture is to divide your logic and that each class should do only its job. So it would be just stupid to like create use cases on a screen where you have no business logic. If you have only some kind of card with static information, you don't need this architecture. You don't need to just imagine some kind of stuff that might happen there. No, you just don't go with it. You just, if it has been communicated inside your team, if you're all okay with that, you can just simply skip it. You can just make an activity that has some little bit of something. But as soon as you see that there are product requirements to complete, that your screen will become more complex, you should in time just make things to happen to implement some architecture there. It may be just MVP. If there is no business logic, you can go with presentation.
May I ask you one more question?
Yes,
regarding the presentation layer? May I ask you to give me more details about this layer? How do you organize it? Maybe some patterns or approaches?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
So presentational layer is totally up to you. It's not, you have your own rules, so it can be implemented via MVP, MVVM, MVC, whatever pattern you'd like. And you can even have different presentation patterns on different screens. Clean architecture only enforces you to extract business logic from presentation. That's the whole main point. And in my project, we use MVP. It's classics. And thanks to Dagger, we just inject our presenters into activities or fragments that are implemented in Vue. And use cases are injected into presenter, and the repositories into use cases, and so on.
Hi, Dima. Thank you for your speech. My name is Sergey. I have a question. So clean architecture doesn't declare how to communicate across the layers and how to build actually dependence graph, and how to interact between use cases and presentations. For example, how to flow from login screen to home screen, whatever. So how you solve these difficult questions on your project?
Okay, thanks. I got it. Actually, I will break it in two questions. So first one is clean architecture does declare how each one how should models speak. They should speak via interfaces. But in some cases, it's like redundant and over-engineering. As about navigation part, we decided that it is presentation, not even presentational stuff. It's more UI stuff. It's too Android framework specific to try to extract it into use cases. It's not exactly business logic. So when there is just simple transition from home screen to profile screen, it's happening in activity. If there is actually some logic around where we should navigate next, for example, when we are coming from push to different screens inside our application, then it is really being handled in use cases. So we are like passing intents through use case and through presenter use case and back to Vue to start new activity.